Good morning, it's November 2nd. This is to my liberal friends. As somebody that now lives in the desert, I'm here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania today, and it's a bit cold for me. Even as a native Pittsburgher, this is cold. This week, the progressive activist groups released a, quote, Gaza 24 statement, asserting they won't vote for Joe Biden, quote, he does not end U.S. support for Israel's brutal war in Gaza. The announcement offers background on Israeli ethnic cleansing and genocide in Gaza. This move is centered on college campuses around the nation and being fed by the ultra-liberal professors who populate those universities. In an open letter from 100 Columbia University professors, they called Hamas massacre, quote, a military response by people who have endured crushing and unrelenting state violence from an occupying power, end quote. I would have thought they were referring to Hamas, who seized power when Israel voluntarily left Gaza and refused to allow a free election since. They ignore that Hamas, the true occupying power in Gaza, has done little to improve the living conditions for the Palestinian people. Instead, they've used any monies given to the Palestinian people to arm themselves and prepare for another attack on Israel. But the problem for the Democrats is the growing anti-Semitism that is bubbling to the surface within key voting blocs for them. Democrats used to be the party of the blue-collar worker, the working men and women, but somehow Donald Trump flipped that segment. Republicans used to be identified as the country club set and the upper income people, and that has changed as well. Today, Democrats have become a party of white liberal elites and minority blocs of voters. We all remember Joe Biden saying, quote, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black, end quote. Democrats now consider Muslim Americans an important part of their voting coalition, but Biden's support for Israel has angered many in this ethnic group, and some have come right out and said it. Jepile Presley, head of the House Progressive Caucus, that Biden may be losing the Muslim vote. At the same time, you have many of these liberal elites on college campuses who are protesting Israel and fomenting hatred of Jews, which is causing another round of angst among Biden supporters and Democrats in general. And this is the box that Democrats have placed themselves in. With so many of their policies based on gender, race, and sexual identity, they have fully embraced a system of politics relying on someone's identity as opposed to the correct policies. We have seen this over and over with the policies of the Biden administration. So now when some of these groups don't like the policies of the administration, they become a problem for Biden and Democrats. There should be no mistake. There is no comparing the terrorist attack on October 7th to the Israeli response. Just as Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu made plain, what would the United States have said if Roosevelt had not responded to the attack on Pearl Harbor? What would the response by the public have been if the United States did nothing after 9/11? Israel has been forced to respond, and the only response should be to eliminate Hamas. If they don't, they'll be opening themselves up to future attacks. But young Democrats, these white liberal elites at some of the most prestigious universities in the country, seem to be willing to show their anti-Semitism without any remorse. In a recent Quinnipiac poll, they found that 51% of Democrats younger than 35 want to end any military aid to Israel. They have bought into the idea that Israel somehow caused Hamas to commit this terrorist attack. The Democratic Party has relied upon the Jewish vote to be in their column, but that might be changing as Jews start to realize the amount of anti-Semitism that exists within the current Democratic Party. They hear people like Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez accuse Israel of committing war crimes while ignoring the terrorist act of Hamas. The progressive wing of the Democratic Party has pushed the party further and further to the left on many issues that are outside the overall public views on issues like gender identity, student loan forgiveness, defunding the police, and reparations, and they now may be pushing a major voting bloc out of the Democratic column. The American Jewish community should realize the Democratic Party is moving further and further left, and so many of them now supporting the Palestinian movement and agree that Israel should be eliminated and turned over to the Palestinian people. That's exactly what they mean when they chant Palestine free from the river to the sea. And just as many of the mega donors in these universities have said enough is enough and pulled their money, perhaps American Jews will finally realize that the anti-Semitism that has long existed below the surface among these liberal elites has finally broken through, and they are seeing it become more open. Other minority groups, particularly in the African American community, have long harbored anti-Semitic views. We remember Jesse Jackson calling New York City Hymietown in a major slur toward Jews. He had to apologize, but today he might not feel compelled to do so. With the nation closely divided, particularly in some of the key swing states, A minor shift in voting patterns could spell a disaster for some Democrats. Democrats and liberals have bought into this and put themselves in a bit of a box. They've so bought into identity politics that they always have to choose the minority, and by that I mean the people of color. But the terrorist attack in Israel had brought their biases into clear focus, and for many within the Democratic Party, they don't know what to do. After the initial shock of the horrors inflicted on Israeli citizens on that fateful Saturday in early October, the tide of the Democratic Party has slowly turned towards supporting the Palestinians. It did not matter that last week the House of Representatives passed a resolution by an overwhelming margin that condemned Hamas as terrorism. By the time 15 Democrats, mostly from the Progressive Caucus, decided they could not condemn Hamas and instead blamed Israel for causing this terrorist attack. But most will point out that the majority of Democrats voted in favor of the resolution. But anyone who's been paying attention knows that the progressive wing of the Democratic Party has been dictating both policy and direction of the party. Joe Biden's administration is rife with young progressives, and they have led the attack on things like fossil fuel and anything that might be viewed as conservative. Around the nation, we have seen protests growing in number and size supporting Palestinians, by default Hamas. It has led to a growing number of anti-Semitic attacks, and nothing is being done to shut them down. This is the conundrum the Democratic Party finds itself in, and I don't know if they have a solution. This anti-Semitism has been there, and now it's out in the open. It's been To My Liberal Friends. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy the podcast, recommend it to your friends.